I am the manager. Welcome. Hi, I'm Joe Butler, the manager of education programs here at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I'm so grateful to have you here for our winter showcase of our Rock Hall EDU platform powered by PNC. We are so grateful to have you all joining us out there. We're going to be having a lot of fun tonight. I'm going to be working with some colleagues of mine, our Director of Education, Mandy Smith, here at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, our education instructor, Deanna, who's also out there as a producer right now. We're also going to be hearing from some of our teachers that attended our Summer Teacher Summit with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame here in July, where the great folks of AEP, American Electric Power, who have been longtime supporters of Rock Hall EDU, help us put on that great teacher development session that we do every summer, and are also part of helping us put on this great showcase that you're watching here today. If you are at all interested out there, any teachers who would like to be part of our Summer Teacher Summit, be sure to sign up for Rock Hall EDU, our free online resource platform of education materials for all learners from pre-K all the way to the oldest rock and roll fans out there. We have something for everybody on that platform, and we hope you sign up for free at edu.rockhall.com. And by signing up there, you'll be on our email lists, and we'll be contacting folks later in the next year to be part of that Summer Teacher Summit. So be sure to stay tuned for that if you're interested in it. But as I said, here tonight, we're here to showcase both how we as the Rock Hall Education Department work at creating assets and telling stories about our nominees and inductees, the people that we consider really our family here at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But we're also going to hear from those teachers and how they take those materials that we create and the content that we put out as the Rock Hall, and they bring it into their classroom and incorporate it into their lessons and their curriculum and connect with the students through the power of rock and roll, which is what we here at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame love to do every single day. So what I want to do right now to get us going is actually bring on our Director of Education here at the Rock Hall, Mandy Smith. I should say Dr. Mandy Smith.
What's up, Joe? How's it going?
What's up, Mandy? Good to see you.
Good to see you too. And I love Zoom or StreamYard, whatever we're on right now, because it's like I see you here. Also, if I go back here, you're like in that room over there. It's amazing.
That's right. We are, of course, socially distancing ourselves here at the Rock Hall tonight so that we can be here live with you all, but also safe for ourselves as we put on this great showcase. Mm-hmm. So, Mandy, I was telling the folks right before we brought you on here that we want to talk about how we as the Rock Hall Education Department, and really as the Rock Hall itself, create these stories, because we are storytellers, right? That's one of our big tenets. It sits on our wall outside of our offices as we walk past every day. One of
our core values.
And we have to have a story to tell, though. And of course, our inductees and our nominees have these amazing stories. But it's hard because you could talk forever about many of them, and many of those stories are still being written. So, it's about trying to find that one thing. How do we make it down to one key point that says this is why this person is inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? And I know you've got a lot to say on that.
That's right. We want to boil it down to its essence, because each inductee has so many things that are special about them, but there's usually one key reason why they should be or are inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And that's what I'm going to talk about tonight.
Well, then take it away.
Cool. Thanks, Joe. See you in a bit. All right. Hey, everybody. I hope you're doing well at home, wherever you are. Like Joe said, my name is Mandy, and I'm the Director of Education, which means that I have the coolest job in the world because we do all this on-site education programming. We have this great space that we're all in tonight called the Garage, where teaching musicians come and engage. But we also have our Rock Hall EDU platform. So what I want to do tonight is I want to talk about some of the resources on that platform. And actually, we're going to do a few things. We have a few objectives. I know most of you out there are teachers, so you love objectives. Objective number one, we want to observe a real life example of a thesis statement. So like Joe was saying, we have these things called why statements for each inductee of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And it's basically why they are inducted into the Rock Hall. And if you think about that, that's very similar to a thesis statement. A thesis statement, is really a summary or an argument of what your main point is. So we think of these why statements as the argument for why this person or this artist or this band has been inducted into the Rock Hall. So I know as teachers, you like to always give your students real world examples of why we're learning these things in our classrooms. So this is a great real world example. Our second objective is to learn about resource types at the Rock Hall, and particularly on our education platform, Rock Hall EDU, which Joe mentioned you can sign up for a free account at edu.rockhall.com. So we're going to go through a lot of those resource types today. Our third objective is to see how the Rock Hall tailors similar information, those why statements, to different audiences. So I'll be mentioning a lot of different teams and different departments who are working on different projects to do basically the same thing, but with different audiences. Because at the Rock Hall, we like to serve everyone who loves rock and roll. And who doesn't love rock and roll? So in some ways, we try to serve everyone, but not at the same time. You've got to know your audience. So I think we can actually take a look at a why statement of an artist that we are going to bask in their glory tonight. We're going to have one example, and that is Carole King. Let's take a look at her why statement right here. After writing the soundtrack of the 60s, Carole King wove a tapestry of introspection as a Laurel Canyon singer-songwriter in the 70s. By singing about her desires, experiences, heartaches, and life, King gave women a voice and the confidence to incite change. So we like to think of this statement as really the crux of why Carole King was inducted in 2021 for the second time, by the way, because she already was inducted for her great songwriting with her songwriting partner, Jerry Goffin. So how did these why statements even come about? Well, that has to do with our induction process and how we celebrate the nomination and induction of these great artists. So in case you don't know, this is a quick and dirty explanation of how the induction process works. A group of 30 super smart people get into a room. Some of them are artists, some of them are critics, some of them are experts and scholars and all kinds of industry people. And I've never been in that room, but I would love to be in that room to see the arguments that they're making, because each of them brings to the table someone that they think should be on the ballot for that year. Then they whittle that down to about usually 11 to 18 nominees that actually get put on a ballot. That ballot then gets sent out to over 1,000 voters who get to vote for inductees for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The majority of the voters are actually the current living inductees. So Paul McCartney gets a ballot. Diana Ross gets a ballot. Next year, Jay-Z will get a ballot because he got inducted this year. Then the remaining 400 or so people are more industry executives, experts, scholars, people that know a lot about rock and roll. All of those people vote, as do the fans. The fans can vote online, and they actually get tallied into one ballot. All those ballots get tallied, and usually the top 5 to 7 people get inducted as performers. As that process happens, when that nominee ballot is created, a team of writers at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame gets together and writes biographies for each nominee. And so you're basically crafting an argument as to why that artist should be in the Rock Hall. And if you're crafting an argument, you need that thesis statement, that why statement. So we come up with why statements for each inductee, or nominee rather. And you just saw Carole King's. A lot of research and writing and editing goes into this process with this whole team of bio writers. And one of the reasons that I am doing this program tonight is because I had the honor of writing the first draft of Carole King's bio for her induction as a solo artist in 2021. So I'll get to talk about the nitty-gritty process of this seed that then blossoms into all of these different things. In fact, let's show the ballot real quick. So here's a page from the ballot that gets mailed out to all of these voters. So you can, it's very small, so I will explain it to you and point out the important parts. You see this great picture of Carole King. You see at the bottom, there's actually a selected discography, so you can go and listen to a smattering of Carole King's great hits. Then you also see a list of who is nominated. Carole King's a solo artist, so that's easy. It's just Carole King. But then in the middle, you see this biography that's just a few hundred words. So you have to really summarize in just a few hundred words why Carole King is important. Oftentimes, these why statements that we write either feed into the ballot or they come from the ballot because we kind of write them at the same time. So we've highlighted a couple sentences here, the first and the last. And you'll see that the first sentence, highlighted there in gold, after writing the soundtrack of the 1960s, Carole King wove a tapestry of emotion and introspection as a singer-songwriter in the 1970s. That should sound pretty familiar because it's very similar to the first sentence in the why statement. It's not exactly the same because, of course, the why statement sentence has to stand alone with just one other sentence, but this has to be the first sentence in a larger piece. Then the last sentence in the bio does a lot of the same work as the second sentence in the why statement. That's in red. By singing about her personal desires, heartaches, triumphs, and failures, Carole King gave women a voice and the confidence to change their own lives and to collectively change our entire world. So you already see some themes forming. The why statement really situates Carole King as introspective, in the Laurel Canyon singer-songwriter style and movement. It situates her vulnerability. She sings about her own experiences. And by doing that, she gave women a voice. So there's kind of a few different themes summed up in this why statement. So the audience that we're really going for here with these bios are not just the voters. They're the only ones who actually get to see the ballot. But those bios also appear on our website. They get put out in all different ways at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But what we're really writing those bios for are the voters, but also the fans, because they want to see their artist represented correctly. They want to see that we captured the importance of Carole King, that we get it, why she should be a Rock Hall inductee. We're also, I think, writing with a third audience in mind, the haters or the people that aren't sure that Carole King should be inducted, because we want to convince them that Carole King deserves to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So the why statement, the bio, they're the first pieces of this puzzle. And the why statement especially gets inserted into everything we as an organization do to celebrate these inductees. Starting with when we announce the nominees, then of course a few months later when we announce the inductees. So that's a time of the year when, or two times of the year, I guess, when all eyes are kind of on us, you know, and people are wondering who's going to get in, who's going to get on the ballot, who's going to get inducted. And so it's a great opportunity to educate the world about who these artists are. So our media team actually puts the why statements and the bios into the talking points for our spokespeople. So when they go on, local news or national news or international news, they're really telling these same stories and these same main points about these artists. We also use them as talking points for our frontline staff who work out in the museum in case visitors have questions, our staff who answer the phones. The phones ring a lot on nomination and inductee announcement day, is definitely, because people are so passionate about who they want to see inducted. Let's actually look at a couple examples of tweets from, the first one is from February. The second one is from July. So this coincides with the nominee announcement and then the inductee announcement. So the first tweet, by singing about her life experiences, desires, and heartaches, well, that was in that second part of the why statement, right? Rock Hall 2021 nominee and potential two-time inductee Carole King gave women a voice. So there we see another one of those pieces. And the confidence to incite change. Then the call to action, cast your fan vote daily from now through April 30th. Then when Carole King got inducted, as she rightly should, in July of 2021, or I guess when it got announced she was going to get inducted. Here's the tweet on the right. This week's Rock Hall 2021 inductees story features Carole King, whose voice can be described as honest, earthy, simple, and beautiful. So again, she's kind of talking from her experiences, right? That's the whole honesty thing. We are forever impressed by her words and how she has always spoken to and for young women. And then we have this link to the Carole King playlist. So you can already see from these first examples that, and there's going to be a lot of repetition tonight because everything sort of comes from these why statements. Next, we're actually going to check out one of those interviews. So we have many spokespeople from our education and fan engagement teams and curatorial and all different kinds of departments. The one that we picked out to share with you, though, is actually our Vice President of Curatorial, Waka Onwusa, who is just an amazing curator and has come up with so many great exhibits since she took over the team here. She went on a local show called Kicking It with Kenny, one of my favorite newscasters here in Cleveland, Kenny Crumpton. And she talked to Kenny about the importance of Carole King when we opened our Carole King exhibit around the time of the induction ceremony. What you're going to see is actually her really talking about the importance of Carole King to women and telling a story about an artifact. But I don't want to tell the whole story. Let's hear her say it.
Carole King,
Amazing.
King.
Yes.
You were really adamant about making sure we got her original piano.
Yes.
And we can literally see, we're waxing poetic, if I may, the three songs here. But let's talk about the check first up top.
Yes, let's talk about the check. So this check was a bet between her mother and essentially, like you said, she's a prolific songwriter. She wrote the song, a song for the Shirelles, Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow? Major hit, first major hit for an African-American girl group to chart and be a million seller. It was her first million seller. Her mom bet her $4.
And so that's Carole's check to her mom.
This is the
you
check.
won the bet.
An amazing story, again, behind the lyrics. So it's really phenomenal.
So Waka really makes explicit how Carole King gave a voice to young women through even her first #1 hit, Will You Love Me Tomorrow, because it was the first huge hit by an African-American girl group and really helped ignite the whole girl group craze in the 1960s. So what we're going to do with the rest of the time is we are going to talk about Rock Hall EDU, our Rock Hall EDU platform. But we're also going to talk about how several other projects that were going on around the building fed into Rock Hall EDU. So if this department over here was making a video for something, we were going to take that video, slap some educational, framing around it and put it on Rock Hall EDU so that teachers can use it. So we'll have a few examples of how that works around the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But first, let's take a look at a slot or at a screenshot from our EDU platform. This is the beginning of the Carole King collection. The Carole King collection has several individual assets in it, everything from playlists to research guides to primary sources. I'm going to actually read the description that we put on this collection to sort of describe its purpose. I'm going to skip actually to the end of the first paragraph. It says, the personal style of King's performance on a specific track, on new songs such as Beautiful, and on subsequent albums like Fantasy and City Streets has connected with listeners, particularly women. So there we get that women shout out again, because it came from a place of unabashed vulnerability. So there, she's singing about her life experiences. Then the second paragraph of the collection description says, use this collection to enhance learning around female empowerment. Listen to the sounds of her career and examine the different album cover art assets to notice what stayed consistent with Carole King's solo work and what changed over time. So the key word there really is female empowerment, because for each inductee, we think about what's really the educational hook. What could teachers use this inductee to teach about in their classroom? And for Carole King, it really stuck out to us that female empowerment was the answer. So let's look at a few of these assets and think about where they actually came from, because some of them came from education, some of them came from elsewhere. The first one I want to take a look at is actually a result of a sponsor collaboration. So PNC is a great sponsor of a lot of things at the Rock Hall. I can't even go into what all they sponsor, but that includes education and also our inductees. So the past few years when we've had our classes of inductees, PNC has supported our marketing content department in making these great inductee insights videos, which go out into the world. They go out on social media and all different things to really celebrate and give insight into these inductees. So since our marketing team makes these amazing videos, we use them on EDU as this sort of introduction to that artist that you might show in your class. But since they're made kind of for the wider public, we put an educational spin on it. And we have our Rock Hall educators actually record an introduction that we then sort of slap at the beginning of that video, edit them together, and it becomes this educational piece that helps teachers teach about Carole King. So I want us to actually just watch the education intro to see how our education instructor and current producer, Deanna Niebel, crafted this education intro to this great PNC video. Let's check it out.
Hi, my name is Deanna, and I would like to introduce you to 2021 Rock Hall inductee Carole King. King was first inducted into the Rock Hall as a songwriter with her lyricist partner Jerry Goffin in 1990. Now, in 2021, we celebrate her 5 decades as a solo performer. When performing, Carole King sets a comfortable stage for her audience so that they feel like they have joined her around the piano. Her piano playing often adds driving rhythms to keep the music moving underneath her gentle and impassioned voice. Rich, layered harmonies from both the piano and the vocals let us, the audience, sing along and make her story feel like ours. Her award-winning 1971 album, Tapestry, speaks to very human experiences, allowing listeners to feel validated and understood. For example, songs like Beautiful express the desire for self-acceptance, especially on tough days. Carole King even reinterpreted You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman for this chart-topping album. She originally wrote the song with Goffin for 1987 inductee Aretha Franklin, and King's Tapestry performance only adds to the many female artists that have interpreted this song to show what being a natural woman means to them. Let's look at how 2-time inductee Carole King empowered women and shaped the landscape of rock and roll.
So I love how Deanna, really, you already heard her say some of those key concepts and those why statements. We have her here today since she's our producer. Deanna, why don't you talk for a minute about how you sort of created this education intro, how you drew from the why statement, and how this all came together?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Mandy. This is super exciting. I'm happy to be joining all of you for this winter showcase to show off our education resources.
Mm-hmm.
For the insight videos that PNC sponsored, you can go on our YouTube channel and see the full video. There's a great reel. I'm sorry.
I said, good point, and you should. You should watch them all.
Because there's some really just great footage of Carole King throughout the years, especially in her solo career.
Mm-hmm.
And so that educational piece, we took a look at the why statement, and that is sort of our starting point and our foundation. And then the goal after that is to find examples, musical examples that support that why statement. And here in the education department, we pride ourselves in being very descriptive with our why statements. And what I mean by that is we're a big fan of adjectives. And this is often something that I personally always encourage teachers working with music, whether they're a music teacher or just working with music and their subject. Adjectives are a really great friend to describing the music in terms of, for example, Carole King's voice is warm, or it's very sort of higher pitched here, or her piano sounds very comforting. You don't have to necessarily know all the musical jargon to get your students talking about the music. And so that's why we had a lot of descriptive examples when we wrote those insight videos. And I do want to give a shout out to our Case Western research assistant, Mara. She's a fantastic writer and researcher. She actually co-wrote that intro with me. And it was just really great to work with her on it. And it brings up another point of the way we use these why statements is she had never done a major project for the Rock Hall before. And this is a really important project that we do every year. And so this was a really great way to sort of train her and get her more familiar with our writing style and how we approach these things. And then after that, it's a lot of proofreading, a lot of editing, a lot of reading it out loud to make sure it sounds okay. And then we record. It's a lot of fun.
It is. And I'm glad you mentioned the piece about talking about musical sound, because I won't get too deep into it here, but we have this great educational philosophy at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and we call it sound, context, meaning. And in a nutshell, what it is we like to teach about how to talk about and deal with and analyze musical sound, teach the context surrounding a piece. So that could be anything from the meaning behind the lyrics to what was going on in the artists' lives to if there was a war going on that would make people hear this song differently than we would today. And then from those things, that is how we derive meaning through music. And so you'll notice that theme sort of going through a lot of these EDU pieces. And that's kind of the key to how we take these things that other departments are working on and make them educational assets.
That's right.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for talking about that, Deanna. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Have a great night.
Thanks. And thanks for being an awesome producer too. The next asset that I want to talk about actually came out of our fan engagement team. Our fans, we define fans as our visitors, our inductees are fans, our teachers and students who come to us are fans. It's kind of our internal word for visitors. And so our fan engagement team gets to engage with everyone who comes through our doors. And one of their projects with our classes of nominees and inductees is to make playlists. We often call them the career defining playlist. And how they make these playlists are they want to show the breadth of the person's career, but they also want to show some of the big hits, but they want to show the stylistic changes. They just want to give a good overview to who this artist has been through their entire career. So it's different than just sort of a greatest hits record that might just have the chart toppers on there. And it actually shows you the trajectory of an artist. So the team, the fan engagement team created, an inductee playlist for each of these 2021 inductees and nominees, including Carole King's. Then what we do in education is we take these playlists, because we have playlists in Rock Hall EDU, and we turn them into an education playlist. So what we did is we kind of took that, the idea of the theme and the educational theme, and kind of wrote this educational introductory paragraph about the playlist that might point out how you would want to use this playlist in the classroom. So I'm going to actually read the first paragraph in the description. Carole King's solo career hits, let me reread that. Carole King's solo career hit its pinnacle with her 1971 solo album Tapestry, when she transitioned from a songwriter to a songwriter and performer. Her skills as a pianist, arranger, vocalist in both the lead singer role and layered harmonic backup vocals shine throughout the album. Writing and recording her own songs, King became a beacon for generations of songwriters, performers, and fans, giving them voice and a new confidence. So here we have that voice and confidence. Her introspective, pensive approach to songwriting empowered other artists to write from vulnerability and to share their personal triumphs, heartaches, and failures with the world. So again, you see a lot of the same sort of language there from that why statement. But you also see some things about musical sounds. And I believe the next paragraph in the playlist has more about musical sound and how you might hear Carole King in the classroom. And so you can see again how we had the original audience of fan engagement making this playlist for museum visitors, but also to send out in tweets to fans and things like that. But then us in education taking that same material and making it applicable to teachers in the classroom. The next sort of collaboration I want to talk about is our community partnerships. We have a great number of community partnerships with people all over, everyone from museums to schools to Boys and Girls Club to all kinds of different institutions. We have a partnership actually with our Maltz Museum of Jewish Heritage in town. And they last year or earlier this year, I'm getting my years confused, sometime gave a or put on an exhibit about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And along with that, they did a whole slate of programming called Women Who Roar. But they wanted women who roar in different industries. So when they came to music, they thought, well, why don't we partner with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and do a program on that? So I actually got to run a virtual program on spotlighting 3 women who roar. And I picked Sister Rosetta Tharpe, who, if you don't know who she is, you have to check her out immediately. She's amazing. On Carole King and on Janet Jackson. So 3 women who have very different styles of music, who worked during 3 very different times in the music industry, but who all roar, who all really made this contribution to music that empowered other women in music and in other fields to roar. And so I actually want us to watch a clip of this to see how we sort of tailored this to our partnership with the Maltz Museum. Let's check it out. We can move on to the next slide and actually think about Carole King's second career, her solo career, through the same song, Will You Love Me Tomorrow? So what I love about Carole King's version is it's so different from the girl group version. 11 years after it was released, Carole King has already written some of the most classic songs of all time. She is already separated from her husband, Jerry Goffin. She strikes out on her own, has some solo releases before Tapestry, the album pictured here. But Tapestry is where she really found her voice and really rose to fame. Tapestry is one of those albums that just swept at the Grammys the following year. It just won every Grammy that it could possibly win because people knew what an important record it was. And just like Carole King, along with Jerry Goffin, spoke to the concerns of teenagers and young girls 11 years earlier, now in the singer-songwriter movement in the early 70s, Carole King is a full-grown woman, and she's speaking to the concerns of women from that place of being a woman. And it's perfect that she did it in this very Laurel Canyon singer-songwriter fashion, because it's just so introspective and so intimate. And so a lot of the songs that she had already written for these girl groups and vocal harmony groups and things like that, when you just sing them with a sort of stripped down instrumentation and it's Carole King and her voice behind her piano, it just changes the meaning to this very introspective, deep, grown-up place. All right, so there you sort of see how we tailor our content to an audience of mainly our museum members and another museum's members, which, you know, museum members want to learn, but they want to learn about fun things and have fun, right? So that's kind of what we did for that. I also noticed that I'm in this same room in that video, and it was kind of tripping me out a little bit. It's pretty funny. I know you're seeing a lot of me tonight, but that's because of the way that our writing team works, and also the way our education team works. If you're really passionate about an artist, or if you really know a lot about an artist, a lot of times you will write the bio and make some education materials and do the public programs and the community partnerships and things like that, because we want to highlight sort of that expertise and really get the right people talking about the right people. So we have more examples, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to go super deep into them like I did these other ones. But our library and archives has so many great resources. They create research guides on all of our inductees that then we actually put in our Rock Hall EDU platform. So if you're having students do a research project, you can know where to point them in the right direction. Or if you want to research more about an inductee that you want to use in the classroom, those are great assets. Also from our library and archives, we get a ton of primary sources that we put on Rock Hall EDU because we know how important it is to teach students to be able to deal with primary sources, to be able to evaluate them and analyze them. Over here, we actually have a track sheet from a Carole King recording session that is on Rock Hall EDU, but we actually discovered it in researching our membership programs, which are on the next slide. And so when we were doing some membership programs to launch our virtual membership earlier this year, we started doing some album spotlights. And we would pair 2 albums together and talk about those albums for, about 20 minutes or so a piece. And then we would invite listeners to, pick the platform of their choice and then listen to those albums in their entirety after they had learned a lot about those albums. One of the album pairs that we did was Carole King's Tapestry with Tina Turner's Private Dancer, which was a great pair because at the time, both of them were 2021 nominees. Turns out they're both 2021 inductees, which is amazing. And they are actually the second and third 2-time women inductees into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So we have the ability to induct people multiple times. For example, all the Beatles are inducted twice because they're all inducted with the Beatles and then they're inducted for their solo careers in different ways. But Carole King, like I said previously, was inducted as a songwriting team with Jerry Goffin, and then again in 2021 as a solo artist. Same thing with Tina Turner. She was inducted as Ike and Tina Turner, and then she was inducted for her solo career. So they were just a really great matchup of albums to explore, even though they were maybe a decade apart in sound. But in doing research for that, Deanna discovered this great track sheet that the library and archives had, and then we thought, well, let's put it on EDU because teachers might really want to use this. So let's see. I went through library and archives memberships. We also, have the exhibit, which you saw a little bit of in the video where Waka was on the Kicking It with Kenny show. And they use a lot of the same language from that why statement and telling the story in the exhibit. So pretty much every facet of us telling stories, and like Joe said, that's one of our core values. We are storytellers, comes from this why statement. But what I want to end with is the induction ceremony, which if you have HBO or one of the HBO streaming services that lets you watch it, you have to check out this year's ceremony. It's my personal favorite of the 5 or 6 or so that I have been to. Everyone was there. There were so many special moments, so many great performances, so many great presentation speeches where someone is inducting someone else into the Rock Hall. And that's what we're actually going to watch now. We're going to watch a snippet of Taylor Swift, who was there. Pretty amazing. She actually kicked off the whole night. And she inducted Carole King into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And you'll notice that her speech follows a lot of those same themes that we established in the why statement. Let's check out Taylor Swift.
To induct Carole King into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Taylor Swift.
I cannot remember a time when I didn't know Carole King's music. I was raised by two of her biggest fans who taught me the basic truths of life as they saw it. That you should treat people the way you want to be treated, that you must believe you can achieve whatever you want to in life, and that Carole King is the greatest songwriter of all time. I grew up dancing around the living room in socked feet to the sounds of Carole's soulful voice, her infectious melodies, and lyrics that I, a 7-year-old, thought had been crafted from my exact specific life experience. I listen to Carole's music now, and I feel that same tingle of recognition. Her songs speak to the true and honest feelings that everyone has felt, is currently feeling, or hopes to feel one day. So it is only right for them to be passed down like precious heirlooms from parents to children, older siblings to younger, lovers to each other. These songs come to you from somewhere else, and then suddenly they are partly yours.
Oh, that's so amazing. I love it how, she hits the themes, but way better than I said it. Carole King taught her she could achieve anything. Carole King wrote these songs for her. They spoke to her. My favorite line is, she feels that tingle of recognition. Like someone recognized her as a woman, as a person on this planet with these feelings. I'm getting a little choked up because I feel the same way about Carole King. Isn't that amazing, Joe?
It is. I mean, and don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm sitting here. I know these are 4K cameras, so I got the goosebumps. Yeah,
that's great.
On end. Because you're right. It's just about authentic connection, and we're moved by Taylor's words because she's telling a personal story about how she's connected to Carole, who is telling a personal story through her art. And that's what we got at that core why statement. So I honestly don't know if Taylor was even privy to the why statement, but
or if she just also understood the crux of why Carole King is getting inducted, which is I think what we captured with that. And like you were saying, like the vulnerability that Carole King brings it was decades ahead of its time. I mean, now Brene Brown is famous for talking about vulnerability and having to enter the national conversation. But Carole King and certain musical artists have been doing that for years and sort of paving that path for people like Brene Brown.
Yeah. Fantastic, Mandy. Thank you so much for talking that through with us, because nobody could see me because I was backstage. But this was me most of the time.
On the edge.
It's always great working with you, but always great learning from you and getting to hear how you were able to walk us through each one of those layers and each one of those departments in ways that we connect to that one single statement. Again, just reinforce some things for me, kind of recontextualize some things for me even. So I hope everybody out there felt the same way. I'm sure they did.
Well, thanks so much, Joe. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for coming in. So we'll see you later. We'll bring you back maybe at the end, but everybody again out there, welcome. If you're just tuning in, this is the Rock Hall EDU Winter Showcase here from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We're so glad that you're tuning in with us here or watching maybe at some point later on your own. I do want to just do a quick shout out here before we move on to our next piece. Here at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, we are a non-for-profit. That means everything we do here is funded and supported by donors and members and people that recognize the value of our mission and help us support it. If anybody out there feels like you can be part of that support, you're able to do so right here on YouTube. We have a fundraiser going live during this video and many of our others that we've had around this time around the Rock Your Giving Week. So if you're able to join in and help support our mission here at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame by sending us a few bucks, we would really, really appreciate it and value it very much. And of course, the best way to do that, though, is to be a member. We have things even including the virtual membership, which you can sign up for, and you can find out more information about all of our membership levels, but especially if you can't really visit Cleveland, Ohio anytime soon, the virtual membership is a great way to access tons of special content that is only available to our membership. So go to rockhall.com/membership, and you'll be able to find more information there about that. So my exciting thing to transition to next is the teachers, which is what we're really here to showcase today. Because for us here in education, we love having school groups of all ages and grades come and visit us. But at the end of the day, it's about the teachers, the administrators, the parents, the guardians out there that want to make sure that their students, their learners experience the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So they bring them here, they engage with them via Rock Hall EDU if they can't visit here. And we want to hear from some of those teachers that, again, participate in that Summer Teacher Summit and how they take Rock Hall EDU content, the power of rock and roll, and bring it into their classroom. We're going to hear from 4 of those teachers tonight. A few of them are going to be sharing with us some recorded video of how they use it in their classroom. Then we're going to hear from one live. So we're going to hear from Kevin Endres, Sara McCue, Lisa Hill, and we're going to hear live from Matt Grandstaff. But we're going to kick it off with Kevin Endres, who is going to be talking about how he utilizes some of our assets around the Beatles, which maybe a lot of folks out there, it's kind of at the front of your mind if you've been watching that great documentary Get Back on Disney Plus, or have maybe plans to see it in theaters. But we're going to send it over to Kevin now to hear how he takes some of our Beatles content on Rock Hall EDU and incorporates it into his lessons in his classroom.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kevin Endres. I am a general music and vocal music teacher in Franklin County Schools in North Carolina. On the screen there, I just showed you, or I'm showing you, a bit of contact information that you guys can reach out to me if you guys have any questions. Before I begin, I just want to say thank you to Rock Hall EDU and thank you to the Rock Hall for allowing me to, or inviting me to speak to you guys. It's a great honor to be given the opportunity to speak with you guys tonight. So the question was asked of me, what do I use Rock Hall EDU in my classroom? Like, how do I utilize it? And to be honest with you, when I first started out, before I did the summer teaching summit or teacher summit, I just used it as a spot where I could look at artifacts or assets and bring them into the classroom as like, look here, see, I didn't really know what I was doing. I just simply looked up a topic, like if I was talking about Buddy Holly, I'd type in Buddy Holly into the search, find some things, and see if I could fit it in my lesson plan as like a different way of adding to my lesson rather than just like, hey, look, here is a video or here is a sound, an audio track, and we discuss it. So after I did the Summer Teaching Summit, or Summer Teacher Summit, rather, it really opened my eyes up to the ideas that I could use with Rock Hall EDU. And this semester has just been absolutely bigger and badder, really, than, in a good way, than the previous semesters that I've used it. So I'm going to bring up my Rock Hall EDU platform here. This is just a basic page when you log in. And some of the things that I use, the great things that I do is I look at my favorites, and I have my collections here laid out. I've recently got rid of some of them. I've had many collections, and what I do is I use that as unit sections, and I look at it and I go, okay, I'm going to teach about. As you can see, I still have the British invasion because I was teaching that just this last week. Finished up teaching it just last week, rather. And so I created a whole collection of different things from the British invasion, meaning Beatlemania, and this specifically honed in on the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. And so I just looked at I started out with the Beatles PowerPoint as like an overview before I dove further into the instruction and looking at the music, looking at the scores. I happen to have a big collection of the music scores and different arrangements of it. We compare things like that in the history of rock course that I created. But I also look at the photos. These photos are just absolutely great to use as a starter. I've used some of these as warm-ups when my students first walk into the classroom. I usually will have something as a warm-up for them to do while we're waiting for kids to come in and get settled. And so I've used this one specifically, and I've said, describe the scene to me. And they don't know. What I've done is I've downloaded, or I've created a link, and they go to it, or I've even just had it up here and I've concealed the top so it doesn't have the Beatles concert. And so I conceal the top here, and and I zoom in. I'll zoom in a little bit so I get just the photo. I go, describe to me what's going on. What could be going on? And so it's almost like a writing prompt that you could use with just a picture. So ELA teachers, perfect idea here. If you want to get your kids kind of going with about talking about a picture or talking about a prompt or something like that, this is excellent. I have found that they've talked about something with a guy named George, and one person wrote about a Curious George encounter. Again, middle school. So I've used those. I've also used the playlists. The playlists are amazing. If you haven't looked into this and you haven't checked out the playlists, they're a great, quick snapshot of all the hits. It's not an extensive library. It is the big hits, usually the big hits of the artists. And then there's some other deeper cuts in the playlist that you kind of have to go, oh, really? But yeah, it's a phenomenal resource when I do listening activities, or when I want to look at the lyrics and compare the lyrics to the music and talk about what was going on historically and getting a good understanding, especially in the 60s. There's a lot of stuff going on in the 1960s. So I do that. It's a great thing. My students don't have access with their school devices to get access to Spotify, so we use it in the classroom as discussion. But what's also really great is that I can create a temporary authorization link with, I believe, anything on the Rock Hall EDU platform, which is awesome. I use the things like the essays. If you haven't explored that, we're going to get to that in a second, where I give them a link and I put in the assignment description that the link was generated on this date. If you're doing this after this date, then you need to come see me for another link. The links are good for 14 days, and I just put it up there, and I make a little note of it, of course, to keep track, but it is great. The kids go right to it. They go right to the website. They get exactly what they need. I don't have to mess around with copying and pasting files, making sure that I share the files and things like that. I just go right to Rock Hall, find the stuff that I really want to hit, maybe adjust some things on the back end on my end on what I want to do, and then that's it. But what's also great is like the essays. The essays are so jam-packed with awesome information. Excellent resource for that. Even if it's just summarizing it and using it as a bit of a mini lesson lecture piece, if you will, I found that works great. So I've done the temporary authorization code if I want to have the students read it, and then we jigsaw it kind of together. We talk about it and discuss it. But I've also, if some students don't have the ability, maybe they forgot their Chromebook or whatever, I can download it, print it, and give it to the students. And that has been awesome. That has just been absolutely awesome. It gives me a good way to also collaborate with the ELA teachers about annotation with texts and things like that. Excellent thing to collaborate if you're a music teacher. I found it as an excellent resource. So that was just a little bit of what I do. I do have a background in special education EC, so it's not usually the traditional music thing, but I use it in a lot of different ways, a lot of different applications, and I love it. It's a great way to, even if you aren't a music teacher, to just use it as a resource for your students. There's so many different springboards into so many different things. There's things for little itty bitty guys with K5, K6. There's awesome things about sound. Also, I've discovered some different things that you can use with sound to teach some science stuff. It's an absolute great resource. So again, this is my contact information. I'm going to put this up here on the screen. Again, I'm Kevin Endres. If you guys want to reach out to me, feel free to do so. Follow me on Twitter. I'll be sending this to the organizers of the event, so that way they can share this with you guys if you have any questions. Again, reach out to me if you want to ask me any questions, or you guys have anything you want to share with me. I would gladly love to learn from you all. And thank you for your time, and have a great evening with this event.
Thanks, Kevin. And in fact, I can see here in the comments that Kevin joined us. here on the stream. So hi out there, Kevin. Thanks again for that great piece. And yeah, we hope that folks out there that may be interested in learning more about Kevin's work and how he's incorporating EDU to reach out to him, as we mentioned. So let's move on to our next teacher, though. We have Sara McCue, and Sarah's going to be talking about how she uses Rock Hall EDU assets to incorporate everybody from Run DMC to Joan Baez and a whole lot of awesome folks in between. So let's hear from Sara.
Hello, my name is Sara McCue. I am a 5th and 6th grade general music teacher at Lenahan Intermediate School in Marshalltown, Iowa. I want to tell you how I got into teaching rock and roll, and then I'll tell you some of the ways that I have used Rock Hall assets in my classroom. I've taught music here for 13 years. During the first year here, I realized that the music skills I was teaching weren't engaging my students, and I needed something that would. I found my way to the Rock Hall and have been teaching rock and roll to my students for 12 years now. Not only are we able to trace current music back to its roots, but students find connections with the parents and grandparents around them. I hear things like, "Oh, my mom has a record player," or "Oh, that's my grandpa's favorite band," or "I've heard this song before, but I never knew where it came from." That is why the resources from Rock Hall EDU have been so helpful. They have enhanced my lessons, and I'd like to share some ways I've used the many resources that Rock Hall EDU has to offer. Here are some resources I've used this year. I've used Run DMC to teach expectations on the first day of school. I've used Dee Snider to talk about streaming and what's appropriate for school or not appropriate for school. I've used the Perspective series with my responding standard as an assessment. I've used the Bob Dylan writing prompt and the Super Bowl halftime show. I want to show you how I've used each of these things. So I started with the Run DMC slideshow, which I converted from PowerPoint to Google very easily. And we talked about Run DMC. We looked at things that made them unique. And then we compared the lyrics of My Adidas by Run DMC with our school-wide expectations of connected, accountable, tolerant, and safe. We were able to connect these 4 sets of lyrics from My Adidas to those 4 school-wide expectations. Another thing I used this year was the video of Dee Snider testifying for Congress and streaming at school. We talked about what does the parental advisory label look like? Why is it there? Whose idea was that? What sparked it, including the Filthy 15? We took a look at Twisted Sister and We're Not Gonna Take It. We listened to the song and the lyrics, and then had a discussion about that. And then we listened to what Dee himself had to say about the song and about being judged too quickly without people knowing everything there was to know. We talk about how really it should be up to parents to decide the lyric or what is appropriate for their own children to listen to. And then we talked about why at school that explicit music is just not okay. I have every one of my students sign up for music streaming because I believe at this age, at 11 and 12, they should be discovering what kind of music appeals to them, what they like, and how they like to listen to music. But because we're at school using school devices, we need to be really thoughtful about what we're listening to. And listening to Dee Snider's testimony just led right into that discussion. And the students were really able to understand both the positives and negatives of that concept. I used the Perspective series with my responding standard, which is one of our national music standards. I was able to convert the perspective slideshow into a Nearpod to make it a little bit more interactive with everyone rather than having a discussion. We're doing a little bit more with the Nearpod, and I want to show you what that looks like. So I moved the slideshow into Google Slides again, but with some of the questions, we made it a little more interactive. After we listened to Joan Baez sing the song at her Rock Hall induction with her special guests, then we do this, a collaboration board, and students type their answers, and then I approve them, and they post for the whole class to see. And then we go back to the Rock Hall slideshow. I like the open-ended questions because then students can type as much or as little as they want to. And in this case, they are comparing their initial response to the song with their response now that they've learned more about it, where it came from, and the why of the song. I have also used the Bob Dylan writing prompt. Well, actually, I'm about to use the Bob Dylan writing prompt. I'm going to show the students this slide with the quotes from Peter Yarrow and Oliver Traeger and the questions for them to answer in their writing. And then we'll listen to Bob sing Blowin' in the Wind. And we'll go back to the slide and discuss some more. I'm hoping that they'll have a little bit more insight into the song as we discuss. I also will use the book Blowing in the Wind, and we'll watch a video of the book while Bob sings the song again. The Super Bowl halftime show is one I didn't think I would use, not in general music, and I don't use it in general music. I have a time every day where I go into other classrooms to cover for the teachers while they have collaboration meetings, and I have been bringing these halftime shows into those classrooms. I want to show you how easy it is to access these lessons, especially when they're in packets like the halftime show one is, and then some work that a couple of students of mine have done. So I just went to the Rock Hall EDU's site. I logged in, I pulled up my favorite assets, and the Super Bowl halftime show asset is right there, the whole collection. I opened it up and I just kind of went through in order. I talked at the beginning about what we would design, and then over the next few weeks, we watched the different halftime shows and talked about the themes and the different ideas presented in the halftime shows. We then went back to the design your own template or slideshow, and I want to show you some of the work of one of my students. And this is used with permission. I was allowed to use this. The student knows. This student decided that 21 Pilots would be their halftime show. They designed their stage. They chose what songs that would be part of the show and a few of the extra details they included in their work. This is a completely voluntary assignment for me, and they still chose to do it because it's fun and all the material was available and easy to get to. In conclusion, using Rock Hall EDU resources are easy. They enhance my lessons. I've been doing this for a long time now, and I appreciate that I can access the resources with just a couple of clicks. It's easy to convert to the format that I need or that will be even more interactive for my students. And overall, I appreciate that these resources are free and available to anyone. It's a wonderful thing, and everyone should take advantage.
Thank you, Sarah. It's so great to hear from her and see all the great ways that she's able to take our Rock Hall EDU assets and incorporate them into her lessons, her platforms, her softwares, her tools, because we know that out there in these times, education looks, feels, works differently for everybody. And so we work really hard ourselves to make sure that our stuff is accessible and adaptable to your classrooms and your learners, because rock and roll is for everybody. We want everybody to connect with this music and its history and its stories. And thank you, Sara, for sharing how you're able to do that. We're going to hand it over now to Lisa Hill. And Lisa is going to be sharing how she utilizes our collection that's actually inspired by one of our exhibits here at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That exhibit is called It's Been Said All Along, Voices of Rage, Hope, and Empowerment. And that exhibit was an intentional act by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to recognize the voices of rage, hope, and empowerment of Black and other artists of color that have been championing for change and progress and equality for decades, for centuries even. And so this exhibit, that is the first thing you see when you walk through our main exhibit hall doors here at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, highlights all of those incredible voices, from Aretha Franklin to Public Enemy, from Sly and the Family Stone to James Brown, and a host of others. And so Lisa is going to take us on a journey about how she utilizes the Rock Hall EDU collection that we created that coincides with that exhibit in her classroom.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Beth Hill, and I am the Director of Inclusion, Equity, and Diversity, and the Chair of the History Department at Hamden Hall Country Day School in Hamden, Connecticut. My apologies for not being present this evening live, but I have had so many different things happening this week that I just couldn't seem to find the time to be here.
I'm so sorry about that. We are having a little technical difficulty. We're going to try running Lisa's video again. So we appreciate you bearing with us here as we just get that video back up and loaded, because I can't wait for you all to hear what Lisa has to share with us tonight. But in the meantime, I'll just remind everybody, edu.rockhall.com is the place to go for Rock Hall EDU. And again, it is free to sign up. All you have to do is have an email and fill that out, fill out our sign up form, and get connected with us and start creating favorites lists and collections of your own, as you've seen many of those teachers share with us so far tonight. All right, I am ready to hand it over to Lisa once again.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Beth Hill, and I am the Director of Inclusion, Equity, and Diversity, and the Chair of the History Department at Hamden Hall Country Day School in Hamden, Connecticut. My apologies for not being present this evening live, but I have had so many different things happening this week that I just couldn't seem to find the time to be here alive and well with you. Anyway, I wanted to first thank the lovely people at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for inviting me to share my experiences with using the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame collection as part of my instruction. The summer summit was really eye-opening and very rewarding, and I learned so much and had a chance to really meet some of the most wonderful educators really you can find anywhere. So first, I come from a family of musicians, and I have always incorporated music in my teaching. My students enjoy hearing music as a way to center their thoughts, and honestly, it helps me focus. So now that I have had make that several years of teaching invested, it seems to me as if the crazier the world gets, the more I rely on music to serve as a foundation, as a bridge, and a way to unify my classes. Whenever possible, I use music of certain eras to enhance the teaching/learning experience of the class. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has a powerful list of resources that enable me to make my classes more dynamic. It's Been Said All Along has proven to be one of the best resources on the site. One thing about teaching history is the crossover of cultures, and music is definitely universal. I particularly enjoy using It's Been Said because of its three components: rage, hope, and empowerment. I think most of us can say we experience this range of emotions in our lives, and to have these feelings represented so powerfully in music is immense. There are also emotions that African Americans, musicians, activists, educators, etc., have experienced throughout the history of this country. I will focus on how I teach my African American course using this particular collection. When I incorporate music into my lessons, I discuss the African traditions of using instruments such as the drum, the banjo, the tambourine, and the body to generate sound. I begin with a recording of "Oh Freedom" to give my students a sense of how African Americans have used music as a way to, if not actually achieve freedom, but to think about it and the otherworldliness of what freedom can bring. For example,
freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Oh.
So I use that song in particular to give students a sense of what the enslaved experienced and their hope for achieving true freedom after such a horrendous life on earth. As I move along the continuum, I discuss the contributions of musicians of color from the antebellum period to the present, using the robust exhibit of It's Been Said All Along. I can let my students hear and see for themselves those game changers who were so instrumental in not only making people think about things differently, but to also listen to the beautiful music that was created. In addition, this exhibit allows me to show students important artifacts, such as those handwritten lyrics, instruments, the clothing of the artists. And so these are very wonderful, tangible kinds of things that the students can see and hear. And hopefully one day we can make our way to Cleveland and they can actually see them in person. So when we look at some of the interviews, activists such as Muhammad Ali illustrates how people's lives were interconnected and that music often served as an invaluable bridge to allow people to collaborate and work together. The interview with Muhammad Ali and Gil Scott-Heron is one such item. I want to briefly discuss the segment on rage. Billie Holiday will always be known for her provocative and bluntly descriptive song, Strange Fruit. Since lynchings were far too common for much of the country's history, the song is a way to teach the far-reaching ramifications of racism and the legacy of slavery. Moving into more recent times, Nina Simone's Mississippi Goddamn is really an eye-opener as we discuss the events of the civil rights movement. Many of my students do not know who Nina Simone or the Last Poets were, but they definitely do once my class is over. I was a very young adult when the NWA Public Enemy era sort of started. I recall Fight the Power as such a wake-up call. Many people thought it was a call to arms, much as Martha Reeves and the Vandellas Dancing in the Streets frightened people like LBJ. I found it to be a reaffirming song to tell people the struggle was far from over. Now, about 30 years later, students can see the relevance and the timeliness of such music. Prince seemed to cross over into all three segments of this exhibit. As I move into the space of hope, listening to Kendrick Lamar, Janelle Monáe, and the touching concert of James Brown the night after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., I am encouraged that the performers are very much enlightened regarding what has happened in the past, but they are giving a nod to the importance of staying vigilant so that positive change can happen. Last, empowerment. James Brown's "Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud" was astounding. The more vocal, resistant parts of the civil rights movement were emerging, and the fatigue many Black people felt was given more space. James Brown's song seemed to release some people to feel free to be who they were. Not long after Brown's hit in 1968, Sly and the Family Stones championed being true to oneself with everyday people. Let's take a short listen to both James Brown and Sly and the Family Stone. Okay, so that was James Brown, and now we'll listen a little bit to Everyday People. So please forgive me if I sound like I'm preaching or teaching. I just wanted to give you an overview of what I love about using this collection and how I use it. As I continue to teach and see the turbulence we are experiencing from the seeming endless debates and cacophony of the pandemic, politics, economics, and education, I am grateful there is a resource that will stand the test of time and hopefully will trigger more creative thoughts of respect, harmony, and hope. Thank you for listening. I hope to meet some of you soon. Enjoy.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm so grateful we were able to get that together for everybody, so you're able to hear Lisa's sharing out of how she incorporates that collection in our exhibit, in our artist stories, into her classroom. So now it's my honor, though, and privilege to also bring on one of our teachers from that Summer Teacher Summit. Mr. Matt Grandstaff is joining us. Matt, how you doing?
Doing great, Joe. How you doing, man?
Doing well. And you're over in Michigan, right?
I am in Michigan, yes.
Great. Well, glad to have you joining us here. You've got a lot to talk about because you've got a lot of Rock Hall EDU assets you use in all kinds of different ways in your lessons, right?
Yeah, and I'll try to get through as many as I can. I don't want to, drag it out or anything, but we'll do what we can here.
Well, take it away, Matt.
All right. Thanks, Joe. My name is Matt Grandstaff, and I teach in a small town here in Michigan in Ovid LC schools, a little bit north of Lansing. So we're right in the middle, kind of the state there. I teach, most I'm teaching 8th grade social studies. And in our district, in our state, that's the American Revolution through Reconstruction. So not as easy to get some of the Rock Hall elements in there. But I also have a music history course that I teach, and I've kind of based that around rock history. So that's kind of the area where I'm really able to use a lot of the assets that the Rock Hall provides. So I'll just kind of run through some of them and some examples. Then look at some specific lessons real quickly here to show you how I incorporate those things into lessons that I've built as well. So with my music history class, I based it on rock music, but it incorporates so much more. And we use compelling questions is the big social studies kick right now that we're using. So you have that big idea for the kids to work with. And the first big compelling question in that class is, is rock and roll a musical style, or is rock and roll an attitude? And I think the Rock Hall does a great job of showing that it is an attitude that includes a lot of different styles. And so we always start with that amazing video of Ice-T and his acceptance speech that really, he just says it better than anyone's ever said it about the attitude of rock and roll. And I believe we have that video. It's pretty short.
Rock and roll is not an instrument. Rock and roll is not even a style of music. Rock and roll is a spirit. It's a spirit. It's been going since the blues, jazz, bebop, soul, R&B, rock and roll, heavy metal, punk rock, and yes, hip hop. And what connects us all is that spirit. That's what connects us all, that spirit. Rock and roll is not conforming to the people who came before you, but creating your own path in music and in life. That is rock and roll, and that is us.
Yeah, and that's just great. If you haven't shown that to your class, I don't care what class it is. I think every kid needs to see that, especially when it starts talking about that it's your life and this is a spirit that you have. But I use this as the jumping off point for my class, because then I can teach, Woody Guthrie. Is Woody Guthrie rock and roll? And so they're looking not at his music so much, they're looking at the attitude. They're looking at his spirit. Miles Davis, is he rock and roll? Bob Marley, Johnny Cash, any of those musicians who don't fit into that rock genre as people look at it, they certainly fit into what Ice Cube is saying right there. So we start with that, and I do a lot of jazz in my rock history class because there's that big connection to jazz, and we have this great jazz program here at Michigan State University that I have access to, and so it's something easy to use. And one of the people we talk about is Duke Ellington. And so using that clip and that idea about, the attitude and the spirit, not conforming and, blazing your own trail, it makes it really easy to teach Duke Ellington. So when I do these lessons, we have a written kind of a reading about them, and then there's always a listening portion to it. And I believe we have one of the, yeah, there it is right there. Go this way over here. So it's just kind of a quick reading about Duke Ellington, some basic background stuff about him. And then there's always a listening portion to it. So then they listen to it, and I go on this side too until that goes away. They listen to it, and they have to answer questions about the music, and that's always the big part. And there's always those questions about, what is the mood? What is the spirit? What is the attitude of this song? So Duke Ellington works excellent for that. And just recently, like in the last 2 weeks, I think, if I'm not wrong, they've started adding some assets to EDU about Duke Ellington. And so now, next time I teach this next quarter, I'll be able to show some of the things that they have, some of the, the posters and different artifacts about Duke Ellington that they're adding to that. It's almost as if Duke Ellington could be nominated. I'm just throwing that out there, Joe, if you're listening. So then moving on here. So looking more at a specific lesson, I spent a number of days talking about Jimi Hendrix. And we use that compelling question that, that idea is Jimi Hendrix the greatest guitar player of all time? And so that's what we're looking at over this time period. And it's always great. There are so many, I think, like Kevin said, of these Rock and Roll Hall of Fame PowerPoints in EDU Yeah, and there's the Jimi Hendrix one. It gives you some fast facts about them. A lot of them have maps included in them that show you where they're from and where their major, places. I think the Hendrix ones, they talk about New York City. They show where he was stationed maybe when he was in the military. But those are a great way to start, no matter what musician you're teaching. If they have those, it gets right to the point. I did mention to Joe earlier, they just put up one about Redbone. And just this week we were teaching in our history class, I'm teaching about the Indian Removal Act and Native American culture. And, there it is in Rock and Roll EDU. So it's something that I could pull out and use really easily. So those are definitely worth checking out. So then with the Jimi Hendrix, again, we do a lot of listening. We do some reading. I do have another reading activity with Jimi in there. That is right there. So you got to go over this way and then you can kind of put your hand around. Yeah, so it shows some of the different things. It talks about Jimi, his history, and then on the back there's the listening portion. I think on that one we listened to Voodoo Child and kind of break that down and talk about his attitude. It's certainly not hard for them to see where Jimi Hendrix fits in with rock and roll. So we do that, and depending on how much time it takes and how much discussion there is involved with that. Then the next thing we move on to before we kind of pop it up there is are the activity packs, and just a little about the activity packs. Again, those are great resources. A lot of them are kind of standalone lessons, and you can just use them as one lesson. What I've really found about the activity packs is they incorporate new artists and they compare them with old artists. Like this one is Jaden Smith, and it's the Jaden Smith Jimi Hendrix one. So the kids, who might not know so much about Jimi Hendrix know more about Jaden Smith, and it talks then about his inspiration and the connections between the two. It does have a listening portion as well. I believe with the Jimi Hendrix, they talk about him, and then there's some questions on Bold as Love, and so you listen to that. Summertime in Paris is the Jaden Smith one, and I wasn't hip to Jaden Smith at all. So using these, I start to kind of see some new music myself. But those activity packs are great. A lot of them I've noticed kind of almost start to move into that SEL kind of lesson as well. This one talks about what makes you unique. How do you exercise your own uniqueness in yourself, and how do you express yourself? And so it's really easy. And I'm not sure what everyone's doing for SEL lessons, but it's really easy to take those things, add a few extra, questions to it into the discussion, and tie those in to all those SEL lessons that we're trying to incorporate more and more of. That one also talks about fashion and style. And so it's another area that you can get into just through those activity packs. I know last year I had a couple kids who were into K-pop, which I know what is, but I'd never really listened. And there's activity pack on BTS and the Beatles. So we use that. The kid was really into Taylor Swift, and there's a Taylor Swift, Paul McCartney one. There's one with Billie Eilish and Dave Grohl. So, I asked them, who do you guys like? Who would you like to learn about? And a lot of times when they say who they want, I go to Rock EDU and I check and see if there's an activity pack that I can use that ties in who I know about and who they know about. So, activity packs are fantastic. One other thing with the Jimi Hendrix thing that I wanted to go over is I know Mandy talked about the library and archive pages. And so if you go to the library and archive pages, first of all, a lot of information. If you're writing up reading things, if you're just getting information and refreshing your mind about an artist before you teach about them, that's a great way to do it. Interviews, articles, and then they've got all these videos in there as well. And so there's a couple of, like for the Hendrix one, there's one about Jimi Hendrix guitars, and it's a whole, it's a gallery walk or gallery talk, and they show different guitars, and then we can talk about the different sounds. They have the acoustic guitar that he did on that movie from the beginning of that movie, which is great. And the other video from the Hendrix one is they have some artifacts. And so if you go in there, they've got this one and they show the handwritten letter or lyrics to Purple Haze. And they also in the artifacts have that patchwork jacket that they talk about in the activity pack as well. So you get a better look at it. You get a little bit of a description of it. And so going into the archive and the library ones, that really gives you a lot of access to different videos as well as just information to help you put these, to help you put your lessons together. So there's a lot of different ways you can bring this stuff in. The easiest thing, I know most of you have probably used it who are watching this, but I'm constantly getting into EDU, weekly, daily, to see what new information they have, what new things are popping up. And it's just amazing the amount of stuff that they just keep cranking out and cranking out. And you can always find a way to make it work. Any of those things, if anyone wanted to get a hold of me, I'm sure I can get my information to Joe and he can send you my way. If that sounds like a plan there, Joe. I don't have my email and all this stuff up there because I'm not at work. I'm at home. Some of us have to be at home. So I really appreciate you guys asking me to do this. I love talking about this stuff, and it's always great to get together with you and Mandy and Deanna and just be able to talk about those things we're all passionate about with music and education. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, Matt. Really appreciate you joining us in. And yeah, we hope you can hang out a little bit. Mandy's back now. I want to actually put out there for anybody who is looking to get in contact with either the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's education department or any of the teachers that you saw present today that some I know shared their personal contact or social contact information. You can reach us at education@rockhall.org.
Yep.
That is our education email channel. Connect with us there if you're interested in getting more information on our stuff or any of the teachers you saw and heard from today. So education@rockhall.org is the email to reach out at, and we had it added right there at the bottom of the screen. I just wanted to mention one thing because it happens all the time. But we're talking about Ice Cube in that video that you mentioned. Ice Cube, member of NWA. Ice-T, another incredible rapper but heavy metal, punk rock, all around kick butt dude. Ice-T is another great artist that is not inducted yet. Though he, again, as I just listed, and working with other inductees like Quincy Jones and NWA and Public Enemy, he certainly has a lot of credentials for, I'm sure, a nomination at some point, because his credits go on and on and on. And so hopefully we do get Ice-T in someday. But at this point in time, Ice Cube is the guy that we have in and we heard from in that great video. So thanks again, Matt, though, for sharing that. And that is going to be available on Rock Hall EDU, that video. So as you said, you just use that in any class. So I'm also just curious here as we look at our comments section. We got another attendee of the Summer Teacher Summit out there, Shane Larrett, chiming in. Thank you, Shane, for joining us and sharing your thoughts on Rock Hall EDU. It's always great to see those long alumni of our Rock Hall teacher professional developments out there joining us for these programs. So thanks, Shane. But yeah, I guess, I want to ask Matt, you one question. You're talking about that sort of generational divide, right? Where you're starting with the students and then finding a way to connect that to something you're familiar with. Has there been anything like that for yourself, though, where you're able to take something that you've listened to for a long time and you hear some kind of new popular music out there today and you're catching those things that you can say, that's where that inspiration's from. That's where they're getting that influence.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of it comes from what the kids bring into class too. And I'll listen to it, but they'll say, hey, if you listen to this guy, if you listen to that guy, and I'll write it down, and I will. And listening to those artists, a lot of it is the newer country stuff in the community I live or work in, and being able to tie those things back to Elvis and to Johnny Cash and to those sort of people, and to explain it to them because they've heard those names. Even if they aren't hip to who they are so much, they all know. They've heard Johnny Cash, they've heard who Elvis is. Willie Nelson, they've heard those names. And a lot of those connections come through that. And so it's really neat to be able to bring that to them and to see that they understand that there is, something before this. Yeah, so that does happen a lot. And so it's nice working with kids. Otherwise, I would just listen to old stuff all the time.
Right
Now, there's anything wrong with that.
No.
No.
If anybody out there on the stream has any questions for the Rock Hall or for Matt, we'd be happy to entertain those here in the comments. So feel free to just type that into your comments section there on YouTube, and we will see it here in the studio.
And you did mention, to email you guys at the Rock Hall, and just to let people know, I've emailed so many times, and you guys are great about getting back. With me.
Thank you.
It's like, where can I find this video? I know it was there. I'm looking for things on this or that, and you always get a response, which is awesome.
We appreciate that. We appreciate you, putting in the time to bring rock history to so many students.
Just taking a look here back, see if we have anybody else joining and asking any questions. We have Aaron Strauss asking us if there will be a Billy Preston playlist available soon. I believe so.
I think isn't there already one? Is there not?
Well, but yeah, to Matt's point, we upload a lot of stuff, and sometimes it can get a little ahead of us. So there we go, in the Billy Preston collection. Yep. So thank you, our producer Deanna, hot on it. She's got it confirmed.
I'm 99% sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Billy Preston activity pack, talking about collaboration, especially the things he was doing with George Harrison and the Beatles, is really good. So if you haven't checked that one out, and that one kind of expands beyond music when you're talking about kids working together, or just going over those rules for how you work with a partner and work in a group. That is a really good activity pack to use as a stepping stone for that. So that one is in there for sure.
I just saw it. It was in there. But I wasn't logged in, so I couldn't see the whole thing, which is why you have to create an account when you go to the website so you can see everything. But it is
and Aaron clarified her question there, that in one of our collections, we may not have had that. So quite honestly, we also appreciate the feedback, the connection that you, the teachers, and the users of EDU out there have for us, because we really appreciate you putting it out there to us, what you need in your classroom and what you need in your conversations, that hopefully the Rock Hall can provide you. So if you are like Aaron and you're like, I can't find Billy Preston, please reach out to us via that email, and we will make sure that we get those things to you, because again, this platform is there for you. It is for you to be able to take the power of rock and roll and bring it into your learning lessons, whether they be in a classroom, on Zoom, Google Classrooms, at home, wherever you are, wherever your learners are. We want to be there and support you. And as Sara showed, we want you to incorporate us how you feel comfortable, how it helps you best, so that this isn't just the way the Rock Hall does it. We want to tell our story the way the Rock Hall tells its story, which is why we spent a lot of time with Mandy tonight talking about why statements, and why we as the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and our foundation spend so much time focusing on what to say and how to say it. But by the time it gets to you and your students, you know them best. We talked about audience. You know your audience. And so we want to make materials that allow you to connect with your audience the way that you do. For Matt, sounds like it's a lot of finding ways to take what you're talking about in your classes, or even when you're talking about the history of rock and roll, connecting that to what the students resonate with, or what topic you have at hand, like with talking about the Removal Act, the Native American Removal Act. So we are so grateful to be able to share that all with you tonight, and hear from teachers like Matt and Sara and Lisa and Kevin. And we look forward to learning and hearing from so many of you out there. If you're interested in attending that Summer Teacher Summit, we will probably be, talking more about that as we get to the end of the school year, sometime in May or June. And typically that's going to happen in July. of every year. So keep an ear out or an eye out in your emails for that. Mandy, did you have anything you'd like to share with everybody before we wrap up this evening?
Yeah, I will say Aaron Strauss just had a comment on the screen that said, she loves us. But I just wanted to just sort of wrap this up by saying that this was the first time I had actually watched the videos that the teachers put together. Obviously, it's the first time I saw Matt's live presentation as well. And I am just floored by the creativity of these 4 teachers and how they have used these assets in their classrooms. I've got to say, seeing and hearing how Rock Hall EDU is used in the classroom has just brought so much meaning and inspiration to what this team has done in the past year and a half. It's really made it come to life. I'm getting a little teary-eyed. I do that often. If you've ever met me, it's okay. Don't worry about it. I'll be fine. And I just wanted to say thank you, not just to these 4 teachers, but to all the teachers, parents, guardians, and anyone else who puts a child's life first. Because, people who give children the best shot at happiness, success, and meaningful lives are just the best people in the world in my book. So keep doing what you're doing and let us know how we can support you in doing the great things that you do.
Thanks, Mandy. I feel the same exact way. We spend a lot of time, as I know many folks these days do, on our computers, creating, collaborating, crafting these assets. And at the end of the day, we have to send them out into the world and hope that, they help you. And so it's so great to hear from Matt and the other teachers that we had tonight, how it's helping. And we want to hear from you all as well. So thank you all again for tuning in. Thank you to Matt. Great job on the presentation. Yeah. Thanks to Deanna and Adam for helping us with all the little technical things. And thanks to Lisa, Sarah, and Kevin for submitting their pieces. So with that, I think that's been a great night hanging out with you all and hearing from you all. So we look forward to, again, connecting with all of you however you see fit. Feel free to reach out via any social channels as well. Our great social media team is always able to send us whatever comes their way that they feel is something we need to hear about. So please get at the Rock Hall in any way you can. Make sure you make it about education, and we'll be sure to find a way to connect with you somehow. So with that, thank you, everybody. Have a great night. Be safe out there, and we'll see you on Rock Hall EDU.
Rock and roll, everybody.